All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Juliana Kerr. I'm the Director of Global Cities and Immigration here at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all tonight to this event. I will be introducing our panel in just a minute. I actually have some brief housekeeping remarks to go through. Just a friendly reminder, this program is on the record. We are being live streamed. I know we have audiences across the country that we're tuning in. We encourage you to silence your phones, but please engage on social media, Twitter, Facebook, post, collect some great quotes from today. Our evening's format, it's a panel discussion, and then afterwards I'll be facilitating an audience Q&A. You can also ask questions online, and if you want to submit a question into our system, you would have to go onto your phone and type chi.cnf.io into your browser, and then I can see them up here on our tablet, and that also works for our live stream viewers. Please note that the views that are expressed by our individuals that we host here, they are their own and do not represent the institutional positions or the views of the council. So turning to tonight, I'm particularly excited about this event because today we also released a new Chicago Council report called Ready to Work, Understanding Immigrant Skills in the United States to Build a Competitive Labor Force. It was authored by our non-resident fellow, Rob Perrell. The report was generously supported by a grant from the Lumina Foundation. We conducted this research because immigrants make up 1 of every 6 workers in the country. And if we want to understand how to best develop our workforce, we need to consider their unique characteristics as well. The report actually builds on over a decade of research the Council has been doing on the impact of immigrants in our economy. We've looked at agriculture, healthcare, hospitality sectors. We've looked at foreign student retention rates and demographic shifts as well. Rob will be sharing some of his findings on this panel as the rest of our experts address broader questions about preparing the workforce of the future to foster economic growth. So turning to the panel, from right to left, Rob Perrell, he's a demographer from, you're right to my left. Rob Perrell, he's a demographic and public policy consultant and a non-resident fellow with us at the Council. His specialties include immigrant, Latino, and Asian populations, community needs for health and human service programs, and Midwestern demographic change. Juan Salgado, he's the Chancellor of City Colleges of Chicago, and he oversees Chicago's community college system, serving more than 80,000 students across 7 colleges. Juan previously was the president of Instituto del Progreso Latino, and in 2015, he was awarded the MacArthur Foundation's fellowship, recognizing his work in improving economic opportunities for low-income communities. Courtney Brown is the Vice President for Strategic Impact at the Lumina Foundation, the nation's largest private foundation focused specifically on increasing Americans' post-secondary success. Courtney oversees the foundation's efforts in the areas of strategic planning, impact, learning, and also Lumina's international engagement efforts. Our moderator today is Doug Belkin. He's the higher education reporter at the Wall Street Journal. And prior to joining the Journal, in 2007, he was the bureau chief at the Boston Globe. Please join me in welcoming this evening's panel, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's nice to be asked to moderate, and it's nice to see you folks here. I'm going to offer a little overview of how I approach my job at the Wall Street Journal and a little bit about the sort of history of higher ed in the country, and then we'll hopefully spin it forward. So I think this is a really well-educated audience, but for those of you who don't know, part of a big chunk of American prosperity that came after World War II was built because we had this tremendous education advantage over the rest of the world. More people graduated from high school and from college in the United States than anywhere else. And it gave us a huge advantage, and a lot of innovation happened as a result of that. And over the years, we've been seeding that advantage. So there's a set of data that the OECD puts out, and they test people from different countries, from the 22 Western democracies and industrialized countries. And they test numeracy and literacy and critical thinking. And one of the things that shows up when you look at this is that folks in their 70s and so forth compare very well with the rest of the industrialized world. And then that advantage begins to slip and slip and slip and slip. And now the group that's 18 to 34 is really in the middle of the pack, except for critical thinking and solving with technology. we're last. America's last in that, which is kind of stunning because we invented the internet, so you'd think, right, we have an advantage, but it's not the case. So the question is, so here we are now, and what I write about at the Journal is the cost of college, the value of college, how college students and higher education in general is preparing kids for the workforce, and how the workforce, how we're able to sort of remain competitive globally. And there's a lot of problems in higher education. If anyone has kids who are going, you know the price tag's brutal. The debt is significant. So a kid who's starting school now will leave with about $50,000 in debt. That's average for most of the kids who are going to enter. About 40% of kids who start a four-year school don't graduate within 6 years. And about a third of the kids who do graduate don't really learn much. In tests of critical thinking, it's really pretty grim what the results are. So this is sort of where we are. And then the question is, where are we going? This report that I found so interesting, one other little data point that I wanted to share, the folks who have, 1 in 2 people in the United States who have a job are overeducated for it. So we have this real misalignment between what people know and the credential they have and the job that they're in. And then we have 6 million jobs where people don't have the skills because things are changing so quickly. The technology is moving so quickly that people haven't been able to keep up. And then this report goes into this idea of where immigrants, which are a huge part of our workforce, 17%, right? And they're pretty much as misaligned in terms of their educational. Most of them, about 42%, have overeducated for what they're doing. So the question is, moving forward, if Pax Americana is going to continue, we need to align these things to keep our economy moving forward. So the question is how. So hopefully we'll have a discussion tonight that looks a little bit at what some of those answers might be. So that's kind of a gloom and doom scenario. And you wrote the report. I wanted to ask you if you left after your analysis, if you felt hopeful or as critical as I just made it out to be.
I feel very, and hi everyone, thanks for being here tonight on an icy and cold evening. I feel very two-track about America and its economy. I feel that we're very educated, and I also see that why did we look at immigrants in this report, for example? Right? Immigrants are 17% of the population. In the Midwest here especially, here's a kind of a doomy thing to talk about, right? Doom and gloom, which is that look at the native-born population. People in their younger working ages in the Midwest are actually in absolute decline in their numbers in a lot of metro areas. So we have fewer native-born workers. It's an aging population. It makes the immigrant population very important for replacing them. In a lot of metro areas in the Midwest, the only population between 25 and 35 that's growing is the foreign-born population. So that's why my report, which had a lot of specialized focus on that immigrant slice, said, well, what can we do to help that immigrant population do well here? And I could share more statistics on that. The demographic changes of the native-born, I guess, are kind of a doom thing. But here's what's the opposite of doom?
Cheery?
Cheery? Here's a cheery thing, and you talked about it, and we'll talk about it maybe some more today, which is that, the American worker has actually done a really good job getting educated. We often hear that workers aren't educated for the jobs available and that we're short of skills. But actually, many workers have more education than is needed for the job they have. And if you go and buy a cup of coffee, you're often served by someone who has a college degree, for example. And if you go to Trader Joe's or a supermarket, you're often waited on, or you see someone stocking shelves who's got a bachelor's degree. So the American workforce is actually quite educated, and it's really not the fault of workers. And we need to start to talk about the fact that workers have done their part to get education in this country. It's the quality of our jobs. We create too many bad jobs in this country. According to the federal government, over the next 10 years, would you like to know the #1 growing job in the United States? The numerically fastest growing job? It's a low-skilled job of home health aides. Would you like to know the second fastest growing job in the United States over the next decade? Those of you trying to get educated and worrying about where we're going to go. Food prep. Okay? And then we just stop with the third one. The third one is this other, what's the episode of Doom? Happy? Is this happy story. The third one is registered nurses. So we have this very weird two-track economy where, yes, there are jobs being created for people with skills, they pay living wages, etc. But disproportionately, we create too many bad jobs in this country. And maybe we can return to this and talk a little bit more. There are ways to do something about this. You can educate workers into the jobs that we're creating that are good, these nurse jobs, for example, IT jobs. There are jobs for people. But you can help workers in other ways, besides moving them from one job to another with $50,000 of debt. You can take the job they have and make it better. You can take the job that a low-skilled worker has and have something called family leave. You can take the job that the low-skilled worker has and give it health insurance, or give access to health insurance to that worker, right? And that worker, therefore, doesn't have to go anywhere to have a better job and a better quality of life and something like a living wage. So more and more, I would argue that we need to talk a little bit less about workers and putting the onus on workers of needing to change their skills, get more skills. If I dig it out of my pocket, I'll find the statistic. It says something like 50% of American, I better dig out my statistics. The percent of American workers who have college degrees and higher is just way higher than the number of jobs that require college degrees, right? So we need to change our attitude away from focus on the worker, blame the worker has to get more education and take on debt to do it, and talk about what do we do to make their jobs better.
You're in the business of trying to align what the industry in Chicago needs and what the young folks who are coming into your school are going to be studying. How do you approach that?
Yeah. Can I, before you do that, can I jump in from a national perspective and push back? Because I come from a completely different perspective than you do. And I know you have all the data and the demographics, but the problem that we're facing is that we once had the advantage as the United States. We were once the most educated country out there. Now, if you look at the OECD data, and then I promise you'll come back with these specific examples, but I want to push back just a little bit. We rank, 12th or 14th in the world with education. We also, only about 42% of people in the United States hold an associate's degree or higher. By 2020, 65% of the jobs that will exist will require post-secondary education. Now, that doesn't mean an associate's degree or higher. That could be a certification, a certificate, a license, an apprenticeship, but some sort of post-secondary training with a recognized credential. And while, and then I'll go back to why Lumina cares, but, and why these careers are in demand, and you're absolutely right, home health aides and others, is because we have an aging population. So there is a need there. The problem is that we have then low-skilled workers that take that job, and then if we look at the jobs of the future, they have nothing to show for it. So we need to have pathways so those people can continue to be trained and get other skills and have better jobs. So so what Lumina does is we really focus on making sure that all people in the United States have opportunities to learn so that we can have a more prosperous economy and better informed citizens that can compete in the global economy. We have a goal actually at Lumina that we set for the nation, and that is by 2025, 60% of those people living in America will have a post-secondary, a high-quality post-secondary credential. And a high-quality credential is one that leads to further learning opportunities and employment. So we want to make sure that people do have these opportunities, because right now we are facing economy where we have, I don't know how many baby boomers retired just in 2017. This aging economy, you brought up the statistic, or maybe Juliana did, about that the immigrant population is a younger population and can fill some of those, that void that the baby boomers are leaving. So we have an aging population, we have new jobs, new technology, the future of work, where we just don't have the skilled Americans or people living in the United States that can fill those jobs. And so millions of jobs go unfilled or go to other people or other countries because we don't have the talent in the United States to fill them. So now you can talk about how you're going to change that.
So I think I want to, before I get into that, make sure that, the narrative matters here. And I think we are living sort of a both-and situation, right? I really believe this, that we have to both understand that, the thinking around, even low-skilled jobs, I'm not sure how low-skilled they really are. When you start to get into, think about a home health aide and what it takes. And, I know so many people that have cared for folks in their final years of life that are there for them. And the level of skill, social, emotional intelligence, and care that's required of a human being to really be present there for that person, to be present for the family members that are out working, and not there with that person. They are, in some ways, psychologists and, like the level of skill, we're undervaluing, the actual skills of many people in society. And so that's something to sort of be reflective on. So on the one hand, we have these, lower valued occupations, right, by highly skilled people. And on the other hand, we do have this challenge, right? And so, when you're leading a community college system, and I've been leading it for 8 months, but prior to this, I don't speak from 8 months of experience. Prior to this, I worked with lots of employers doing basically the same kind of work. And, the reality is that, we are just beginning to make the changes that we need to make in higher education, that will get us to really helping people to be more, and the way I think about it, upwardly mobile in society. Because if we, when you speak about the numbers, that 60 by 25 goal, right? Embedded in that goal are, thousands and thousands of people in many, many places that are getting, that little more income, that education opportunity provides them, that then provides the space for future generations to be able to launch into careers. And when you lead a community college system like ours, you are dealing with, because we're 80,000 students and our price point is $1,753 for a full load, 12 credits and up. We got students taking 18 credits, that's what they pay for a semester, right? So, with books included, you're a little over $4,000 a year. And so those students that come to us, they're not exclusively, students from, working and working poor families, right, in lower income communities, but they are in large part those families that, just don't have enough to take that direct 4-year route. And increasingly, middle income families that just don't have enough, and are understanding that the value proposition here is really, really strong. And yet these community colleges for years were not oriented towards the careers in demand in the marketplace. They have very little connection to employers. They didn't really understand what was required from a skill standpoint of that nurse. So yeah, we were graduating registered nurses at the community college, but yet those employers weren't really hiring our nurses, and so we needed to change that. And the way you change that is you get those employers in front. You get Rush and Lurie and the advocate system, and you get Cook County. You get the leadership from the industry, and you say, what changes do we need to make? How do we revamp our curriculum? What investments do we need to make in our facilities? We put a $250 million investment in New Malcolm X College, right? We built a brand new curriculum, and right now our challenge is growing to scale because of the growing need. And I'll just say, the more of the population that's, and I'll use the word freed up to be able to take advantage of the opportunities we have. And I use freed up because, maybe it's a record from the past or a lack of a document, or maybe it's freed up because they have a little more income, right? the more the population we can free up to take advantage of these high growth industries, if our community colleges are doing what we've been doing, we're doing really well in healthcare right now. We're making an investment in a new TDL, transportation, distribution, and logistics. That's not just trucking. That's the whole logistics industry. That's Amazon and Echo Logistics and one of the fastest growing industries. In engineering and advanced manufacturing, it's coming back. And we can't produce people fast enough, so we're doing a $45 million investment to build a new wing at Daly College so that our colleges are really ready for this. And it's really important, I just want to stress one other thing that's really important. One of the things that we did in higher ed for many, many years, and the community colleges were not the only ones guilty of this, but largely, is we had students taking a plethora of courses without an idea of where they were going, and ended up not getting any kind of credential, let alone one of economic value at the end of the road, right? So you had these horror stories, and I went to community college. I sat next to students that never went anywhere and had 99 credits, 89 credits, right? What is that? So we're shortening our course, requirements in some cases. You say, well, shortening, does that make them any less valuable? No. The content, just because you're in a seat for a longer time period doesn't exactly mean you're going to get a better education. And so we're making sure that the content's there and that the courses that you're taking are the ones that you really need to take for that overall career path, and that they align, that they stack to the next opportunity. And I just want to share that, the level of interest from four-year universities, because we're not just about short-term training, in community colleges, increasing by leaps and bounds. We just signed guaranteed admission agreement with the University of Illinois system. You come to a community college here with our tuition rate, you want to go to one of the best engineering schools in the United States, and you can get that pathway, right? And so, these are the kinds of things that higher ed needs to be doing, to really accelerate opportunity. And if we don't do it well with the population we're working with, we don't hit those goals. Right. That is the bottom line. And so we need to have a renewed interest in understanding that the population we're working with struggles tremendously. I don't want to take all the time because I could, but they struggle tremendously because they don't have the same level of supports. I'll just tell you one thing we know for sure. We work with population from public housing, with population that comes to us with disabilities. We work with our veterans. We have centers that support all of them. And the thing that we know, we have wellness centers, is if a student comes into a disability center or wellness center, they're part of our CHA partnership where they get supports, they do extremely well. They graduate at higher rates. And so it's almost like we know the answers. We've got to have more will as a society to actually execute upon those answers.
Well, I wanted to follow up what we're saying. I want to make it clear that I really firmly believe that let us not let any good job go unfilled in the United States. So the extent that there are sectors creating jobs that need a high skill, oh my goodness, move native-born Americans into the kind of education so that they can make that kind of salary, fill those jobs, that they don't go away to another continent or something. And as somebody who's probably overeducated himself, I'm all on board with that kind of thing. But the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics in Washington that does all of these analyses, they say that 40% of the jobs we create in this country require only short-term, on-the-job training. And I want to make a point about how that fits into immigration. When we allow an economy to create a lot of low-skilled jobs, which I was talking about before, and we don't improve the quality of the job in terms of the support for the worker, what happens to that? They become immigrant jobs. They become jobs that are back room, out of my way, in a field, in a factory, and I don't care about it anymore because I'm not worried about that worker and the quality of the job. So that when you look at those low-skilled workers in the United States, who they are, 20% are immigrants. Half of those immigrants are undocumented. So you see all of the anger and frustration in the American public over undocumented immigration, it's a reflection of the poor quality of jobs that are relegated to that population. So that's why I come back to this topic of, yes, along with let's move people into those good jobs. Let's also worry about people who don't have good jobs waiting for them and make those jobs better.
I wanted to pick up a bit on what you were talking about in terms of moving folks into community colleges and through them by asking what, and maybe you can take a crack at this, what was learned by the very successful for-profit schools, which for a long time ran the table in the community colleges until the Obama administration sort of pulled the plug on that, and they've crashed largely. But they did a lot of things well. They did a lot of things not so well as well. Is there lessons that you guys have taken from that can be applied to getting more folks skilled up?
Specifically from the for-profit? So there are a couple things. I would say and I'm going to take it more general and then I'll try to pull it back there. Remind me if I don't. One of the issues that I think that we are facing in the United States is we have an enormous set of untapped talent resources. We have a huge equity gap in the United States where African Americans, Latinos, and American Indians attainment falls far short of the average attainment rate in the United States. That is untapped resources. We need to find better systems that can actually serve those students better. Immigrants, the same. How can we find better systems that are going to serve those students and pull out those untapped resources because they have skills that they learn on the job. They have knowledge that they learned in a different country that is not recognized here. The thing that the for-profits, or some may do well, is find other opportunities. So it doesn't have to be seat time. It's not that you have to sit somewhere and listen to somebody speak at you for 12 hours a week in order to get a credential. Some of the for-profits were more innovative in thinking about online learning and thinking about competency-based education, which we believe in and really can be a game changer out there. And so that's where some things went well. The bad things is they did not serve the students we care most about very well. They left a lot of people with a lot of debt and without any credential to show for it. And that we need a system that's going to serve all students, give all students opportunity, and recognize that on-the-job training and turn that into a credential. So when that factory closes and that person has learned something on the job, they have something to show for it, and they can go to your community college and say, I learned this on the job. What can you give me for it so that I don't have to now sit here for 2 years because I know half this stuff? And then you can acknowledge that and give me some assessment so to show, or I'll actually already have it verified and it means something.
Yeah. Well, I just say, overall, when you get a competitive force like that, it, really requires you to rethink. I mean, you have colleges now really, actively looking at prior learning assessments, right? And incorporating, these things. But I think one of the big pieces too here is just, again, when you ask our students, and, our students are very diverse, but, you ask them, about the important elements of their experience, work-based learning is critical here, right? And so when you, and healthcare is a great example. It's incorporated. Teaching does some of it, but we have industries that just haven't really figured out how to create work-based learning in a way that is also equitable, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, you've got. In the city of Chicago, there's an effort right now to look at the financial services industry, what the recruitment pipelines are and how we think about those things. And we are going to be increasingly aggressive as a community college system in creating those work-based learning opportunities in those apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships and internships, so that these workplaces working hand in hand with community college systems can provide the full plethora of what students need. I mean, part of the challenge here is that these students, like me, my dad was a factory worker. So you graduate, I was an econ major, right? So first of all, your classmates have been reading the Wall Street Journal all their life. And their parents are doctors and nurses. In your classroom, you're a little bit behind. And when you come to social connections, who's going to hire you? you're even further behind. And so we've got to work on that too. If we want to even the playing field, we've got to make sure that students in our system have real shot at work-based learning opportunities while they are in a community college setting. In a city like Chicago, we could really make that happen, if there's a concerted effort. And, while I'm new, I'm really looking at, accelerating the amount of opportunities, particularly in industries where it's just not present right now. Logistics is another one. We can do so much more in work-based learning in the logistics.
You've got the White House, Trump and Obama have both really pushed hard in that direction to make that happen.
Yep.
For those of you who don't follow this stuff, there was some research that came out, I think, of Stanford, the Raj Chetty research, and he tracked a bunch of folks that went to college and then where they were 10 years later. And he looked at the social mobility, the economic mobility of these kids, and then tried to gauge what schools were doing the best job at taking kids from the lower classes and moving them to the middle classes, and from the middle classes to the upper classes. And it's fascinating what happened, and I wonder if you've learned anything from what that study said beyond sort of the experiential learning.
Yeah, so I think what we know is, in general, and I was sharing with you in the backstage that I've had the pleasure of being on a working team with Raj Chetty, and going to be approaching him about helping us to better understand our value proposition, which is basically upward mobility, right? What we did learn from that study is, you think about community colleges. Community colleges do a pretty doggone good job of moving students, from the lowest, quintile, the poorest communities, to middle income, right? And it goes to reason, right? So if we want to help people get up, that ladder, right? Certainly there are other institutions that can help students to catapult, all the way to the top, so to speak, quintile. But those are few and far between. So how do you measure success of an institution? That's the question, right? Do you measure the success of an institution by the students that they get, right, already extremely well prepared, and how far they're able to take them, or do you measure it by, and this is what I would like to measure an institution like City Colleges by, right, by where they started and how far they got, and how stable how far they got was for them throughout their lifetime. And the impact, so we don't think about things in little boxes, the impact that has on the surrounding people that are in their field of influence. Because, the theory here, and this is, Raj Chetty got to looking at this stuff from the vantage point of looking at places, and understanding, there's a deep frustration in him as a researcher, in that these place-based strategies were missing something critical. And it had to do with mobility. It had to do with, we really need to think about mobility, as a strategy. And so, what he's looking at is, what are high mobility communities? What are low mobility communities? What is a point in a child's life when mobility, being in a high mobility place, is going to have a greater impact on your overall social and economic mobility? And then he's digging deeper and saying, what are those colleges that are high mobility colleges? Not just keeping people in the rung that they're at, right? But really moving people up. And I think that's something to aspire. So what I learned from it, and I learned it before I came in as chancellor, is that I think we need to, if we really want to rethink higher ed, we need to rethink how we celebrate success, right? And what metrics we use to celebrate success.
Can I pull on that? So I agree with you completely about how we measure success. I also think if we want to rethink how we educate more people in this country for tomorrow's jobs, that we need to rethink the whole system, because right now the system is not serving today's students. Today's students are adults. They're not 18-year-olds, they're not kids. Right. They are adults, they're working, they have children, they have debt. Many of them have actually experienced post-secondary education somehow. They started, and for whatever reason, 30 million of them stopped out. So the system does not serving them well. And if we think about immigrants in this, using the report, we have these a few different bodies of immigrants, I guess, that you highlighted in the report. One of them are the overskilled and underemployed. And the problem, those are adults that are here, and some of what they know and are able to do has not been recognized here. And so how can we fill the gap? And so what they have, we can now recognize. Maybe it's an English as a second language course. Maybe it's getting some extra piece so they can get the license that's applicable here. So we need to fill that gap for those people. The other thing we need to think about are the adults that have no recognized training. And how can we get them into a community college or into an apprenticeship program or into a certification? And if you think about the manufacturing jobs that are going to come, the ones that we had yesterday or 10 years ago that you didn't have to have anything but a high school degree, they don't exist anymore. And so we need to find ways to credential and acknowledge, recognize the prior learning that these individuals have. And that's really the key, is that if you think about the goal that I set, that we've set for the nation, the 60% by 2025, 70% of those people are adults. So they are not the 18-year-olds going to a brick building. They are, people we pass every day that are working and taking online classes and picking up their kids from daycare. So that's how we need to change the system.
Absolutely.
You mentioned manufacturing. You said something really provocative when we spoke earlier about what potentially is going to happen if Foxconn, for those of you who are watching on the internet in Wisconsin, Foxconn has said they're going to come in and hire 13,000 people to build plasma TVs in Wisconsin. And there aren't 13,000 people who are prepared to take those jobs. So they're essentially saying people will migrate because the jobs will be good enough. We'll see, I suppose. But you had some provocative insights, I thought, into what
Well,
will
I'm going
happen.
to hew it back to the immigrant story, which is my specialty. But there's a couple major economic development projects in the Midwest right now. There's this Foxconn story in southern Wisconsin. They want to open up a plant to build plasma, and it may hire 13,000 people, but there are only 100,000 unemployed people in all of Wisconsin. So tell me this: who's really good at migrating? Who's really good at moving away from the home? It's the immigrants again. So there's this ironic thing, and I think Scott Walker will spin in his, well, he would be spinning if he knew this. If we move 10 years forward from now, okay, if Foxconn is a success, it's got 13,000 workers, boy, you're going to have a lot more immigrants in Racine, Wisconsin. And you're going to have them in a couple different places. You're going to have them in the science and engineering jobs where we just don't get enough natives into those jobs when we need to, into that education. Natives to get electrical engineering degrees. But again, if it's Foxconn, if it's mass production, there's going to be low-skilled jobs. And who's really good at filling those jobs, as I've talked about today? So ironically, there's this. It's almost a kind of a trap we have. Given where the native population is with its skills in the U.S. right now, inadequate or unmatched skills, when you have economic development and job growth, immigrants take those jobs because they're better suited for them, either because they have high skills or very low skills. So we'll watch Racine, Wisconsin, where the working age native population is down 12% in the last decade, and the immigrant population is up 5%. We'll see it in Fort Wayne, Wisconsin, where they're spending $300 million on an incubator of businesses. We're going to watch what Fort Wayne looks like in another 10 years. Mike Pence will be very surprised at how it looks. This is the reality of these, this really complicated situation of who has the skills and what kind of skills are our jobs actually rewarding.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true, that you're going to see a pretty large transformation. I also know, by the way, I've been out to Milwaukee Area Technical College and at Gateway, both so in that area, and we're going to be working with them, to help pipeline, because they recognize, they're being approached by the Foxconn folks to help them build the workforce, and they're not going to be anywhere near capable of doing that, right? And so, we have to think as a system about, so mobility, right? Going back to a little bit of work that Raj and others are doing. I mean, I think we've got to get better at a society at helping people to think about, mobility. And in our case, at city colleges, if Foxconn comes and we're able to train people, and there are good opportunities there that they can get, they may not continue to be Chicagoans, but they will be upward mobile, and their children, will have a better shot at the American dream in the future, and that's our responsibility.
So Courtney, you're looking at this from 50,000 feet, right? I mean, the idea that we'll get 60% people with the post-secondary credentials, but if they're not for the jobs that people need them for, how does Lumina try to steer folks in that direction?
Absolutely. So it's not about having a piece of paper. So we're not about counting pieces of paper. We're about counting high-quality credentials that actually lead to jobs that the labor market is demanding. So you talk about the labor market. And those are all people in the United States. And so I think the immigrant population is an important part of that puzzle. It's not for them. It's only about the native-born population. We've always been a country with immigrants that are a huge part of our economic drive and our economic success. And so if immigrants can fulfill those jobs, then that's fabulous. We have that resource here. And if not first generation, second generation, when we think about where the economy is going, most of these unfilled jobs immigrants are going to fill. We look at our population and our dwindling numbers and the change that we need immigrants to fill many of these jobs. We also need better state policies. So Wisconsin needs to really think about their attainment agenda and what can they do to better serve the students in Wisconsin, so to ensure that they're getting the skills and the knowledge, not that they can't come from Chicago, because that's also great. But what else can Wisconsin do to really drive? Because right now I'm thinking, and I don't have the number exactly, and I'm looking at my colleague Amia Foston, and maybe he has it. The Wisconsin, probably their attainment rate is 50%, and so they've got a lot of people in Wisconsin that don't have an associate's degree or higher. And so they need to start thinking about how to educate their workforce, whoever they may be, native-born or foreign-born, so that they can actually fill those jobs, so that Foxconn doesn't go somewhere else to another country and fill those jobs.
I think one other thing we have to confront that goes along with all this is, I bet you most of you will agree with me, there's a really vicious ageism in the labor force these days. If you are out of work when you're in your 50s, certainly your 60s, even your 40s, it's tough. A lot of people don't want to hire an older worker. Is that not pretty clear, right? And yet, in a place like Wisconsin, a Midwestern state, a lot of the unemployed or even the employed labor force is older. So what do we do to make sure that a place like Foxconn or anyone else gets over this anti-age reality in their hiring? And so if someone is 50 years old, fine. How do we make sure they get hired and that we don't hire the younger immigrant or the younger whoever? I think it's a huge problem in this country, the discrimination against the older worker.
Yeah. So I think employers have a play in there. I mean, they should be constantly training their employees, and so that they are ready for the next job, that they don't have to hire from outside. So I think the responsibility is with employers, policymakers, higher education institutions, and other educational providers to ensure that, to compete in today's job, you can't be trained at 18 and then, by 60 you haven't had any additional training. We all need lifelong learning and continuing to upskill.
Well, this is our time to open it up for questions. So thank you so much for leading this provocative conversation. And now we can take questions both from the online resource that I had mentioned earlier or here in the room. We have microphones, so I'm going to go ahead and call on individuals. And then please wait for the mic and introduce yourself. Please stand and keep your question brief, please.
Patrick Rose. I live in the city, obviously. I've noticed as a millennial a lot of ads around the city saying, hey, millennials, come to Milwaukee, we have better jobs, and doesn't riding the L suck? And this is just recent. I think they just started posting them within the last month. As a millennial, I wouldn't move to Milwaukee, but I don't know what they have to offer. I've been there because I'm from the northern suburbs originally, but do you think that you would see a lot of people my age moving out of Chicago to other places because rent may be cheaper, or I don't know. Do you think those ads would even work?
Demographer? Maybe
Oh,
you know.
I was going to say the behaviors of the millennials is one of the great mysteries of our time. Everyone wants to understand the millennials. And what I'll say actually getting a millennial to move to Milwaukee is probably pretty easy compared to a lot of other places where there's no way they'll move to, because Milwaukee's at least a city. So you got that going for it. And actually, millennials are why Chicago as a city is doing pretty darn well, because we keep attracting young people for the urban lifestyle. So Milwaukee doesn't have what Chicago does. And some of their ads said, you know, we have a lakefront. That was one of their ads. And someone tweeted, you know, yeah, well, did you ever see this one over here? So I don't know how well they'll do poaching us. But, you know, as most Midwestern metro areas, they'll do real well at continuing to attract millennials who grew up in small towns.
I got a solution for you, right? Is to advocate for a very high-speed train, okay? And you can live in Chicago.
Live in Bucktown.
Live in Bucktown and work at Foxconn, no problem.
Other questions? Sure, we'll go back there.
Hi, Andrea Messing-Matthew from Education Systems Center at NIU. This question is primarily to Juan Salgado, but also to the rest of the panel. As we think about preparing students for post-secondary pathways, I think we often forget that by the time they get to the post-secondary space, many of them have already either lost their interest or they're not sure where they're going. How do we reach back from a community college system? How do we reach back into our feeder systems? And I'm thinking primarily of CPS, which is such a big system to try to reach back into, to make sure that students get the kind of preparation, exposure, interest, and awareness there so that they are prepared to get into the community college space.
I'm so glad you asked that question too. You know, this is actually one of my, you know, like, that's actually the #1 priority, okay, in many respects, because, you know, here we are. We built an asset at the community college level that's in every neighborhood. We're pointed towards career paths, and we can have a presence in high schools to a greater degree than we've ever had if we're very intentional about it. So let me give you a few things that, you know, we're beginning a pilot, right, that we're going to be growing, okay? You know, #1 is we can have a real impact on sort of the psychology of a lower income student. You know, when you're being told about college possibilities, but you see the reality of your family income, you know, there's a real, you know, something there that we have to address. And, you know, in the city, you know, our mayor put forth this Chicago Star Scholarship that says to every public school student, you know, that's entering into a Chicago public school, you get a B average, okay? Graduate from a Chicago public schools, you can come to City College of Chicago at no cost. No tuition cost, no book cost. You got 3 years to complete a 2-year degree. And so when you're looking at a young person who's a dreamer, right, no access to financial aid, you know, and you know, living in a home where they're sharing a bathroom, where the whole family lives in one single bedroom, 5 people, right? And the next family lives in the next bedroom, 5 people. And they understand that this is the ticket to their success. So we can impact the motivation, you know, possibilities. We can impact the savings by going in and doing dual credit, dual enrollment courses. Right, by the way, Chicago Star Scholars, we're up to 3,000 students that are scholars in our system right now, okay? In dual credit and dual enrollment, we're up to 4,000 students. We can grow that even further. These are students that are already college ready. If you're already college ready, why are you taking high school courses? You might as well take college courses, right? And so the only barrier between a student that's ready and a course is the disposition of the city colleges to work with the Chicago public schools to make it happen, right? And I've said we have an open checkbook, okay? The only barrier to that happening is the student's readiness. and we're going to work hard to make that the only barrier, right? And then the other thing we could do is begin to go into the schools and make sure students understand the career options that are available. Students have, you know, their idea of careers, a lawyer, doctor, being so limited, right? I ran a healthcare high school before I came to City Colleges, right? And, you know, you learn in the 9th grade that healthcare is like 250 something occupations. They're all very diverse. And so we're going to bring that value proposition. A week ago, we announced 7 post-secondary navigators. They're going to be going into high-needs high schools that are going to be helping students really with the guided pathways, understanding, exposing them early on. Why? Because we get, in about 10 days before the close of our registration, about 10,000 students in that last week, because we're open access. And we want them to choose the right courses, but it's just all at the last minute. And we have to start to get really ahead of this. And so we're going to be doing navigator work, and the other thing is we're going to be bringing our career and technical education work into the high school setting, right? So think about a logistics on the move, you know, van that shows up to a high school parking lot that exposes students interested in careers and logistics to that particular field, and then brings them to tours to our employer partners, et cetera. We've got to do a whole lot more of that. So, you know, we're working on it, right? The key is to accelerate it and to begin to get the systems to incentivize it, because right now, there's no incentive. This is all free tuition. We have to figure out a way to fund. Everything I mentioned right now, there's no reimbursement for, okay? The system was set up before that you only start to generate reimbursement when the student becomes a full tuition payer. And so we got to create new incentives at the state and federal government level to really make these programs work and more abundant.
We don't have that much time left. I'm hoping to take one question from our online people who have submitted some really fascinating questions, and then one more from the audience. We only have about 7 minutes left, and so Courtney, I'll direct this one at you because it's really kind of a fascinating question. When Juan was talking about doing more work-based work in education, there's a question out here that's, why haven't the apprenticeship programs and concepts been more broadly accepted and adopted in the United States? We see that in Germany. I know a lot of people look to the German model. But just from your experience looking at the education systems here, you know, what is your thought on apprenticeships?
So there are registered apprenticeships, and I think there are about 500,000 of them, so there are not that many. And I think that while there's some control over quality, they're somewhat limiting. And so what we're trying to push through are other types of apprenticeships, and so we can build on that, because the work and learn model is absolutely what we need so that you are in a career and you're getting recognized for what you're learning and doing. You know, one of the things that we have to be careful about some of these things, and some of the reasons that we're fearful of like the German model, is because it's a two-tier model. These are the people that, you know, you're not college ready and you're low income and your parents didn't go, so you can go down this pathway. And you, high income majority person, you go to college because college is for you. And we definitely don't want a two-tier system. And so some of the things that we're really careful about is ensuring that all people have opportunities to go to both. And that if you choose the apprenticeship program or the certification program, you actually have a pathway to the degree, a real pathway, not a fake one on paper, but a real way to move from one to the other, so you can constantly upskill and get the credentials you need.
That's great. Okay, so time for one last question, and we'll take it right over here, please. You can bring the microphone and have about.
Hi, my name is José Ramón Fernández Peña. I'm the director of the Welcome Back Initiative, a program that works with foreign-trained health professionals to help them get back to the workforce here. So just 2 comments. I think that it's important to go with the fact that it's not an either-or proposition. It's not either we work with immigrants or we work with people who are here. Certainly in the health sector, there's enough vacancies to pull in all these individuals. And second, as an immigrant that has worked with many immigrants throughout my life, it's not that immigrants are faster to move or better at moving or happier to take the job than nobody else takes, right? It's perhaps desperation that leads to those decisions, or the acknowledgement that there are no doors for them to get to the places where they should be working. Thanks.
I'm really glad you said this, because this is not a zero-sum game. We need all the talent that we have in the country to fill the jobs that we will have tomorrow, and to be able to compete in the global economy. So absolutely, we need everybody.
Thanks. Well, we actually have one more. This is getting a lot of votes because there's a voting system on here. Is a question on artificial intelligence. So as it's infiltrating our markets and culture, what can we do to protect and secure low-skilled jobs from being replaced by technology? And that's out there if anybody wants to tackle that one in the last 3 minutes that we have.
So I'm not an AI person, but why would we protect the jobs if we can do them better? It's not that we will need less workers. We just need workers with a different skill set. And so if we constantly upskill and we're constantly learning and giving people the opportunities, whether it's in the job or in educational programs, that's what we need to be to compete in a global economy. If we prevent against them, that's just damaging. We want to be innovative and move faster.
Although I do worry, there's a lot of evidence that we will lose a lot of high-skilled jobs with artificial intelligence too. So again, you got to protect jobs. There will be less jobs that move people into, potentially.
Don't you think they'll grow new high-skilled jobs? I mean, all the jobs aren't going to go away. They're just going to be a different type of job.
Well, jobs can go away.
Well,
There's
and
no-
jobs should go away. I mean, think of the jobs we had 100 years ago that we don't have today. But and again, I'm not an AI expert at all, but I would believe that new types of high-skilled, middle-skilled, entry-level skilled jobs will be created.
I'm just worried that, take the example of the big technology companies that have actually very small workforces, enormous market capitalization, but very few workers are running the Facebooks and all that. Can that not expand to other industries? And yeah, you could have a net reduction in workers. There's no law that says 60% of your adults have to be in the labor force. There's no historical rule around that. So I'm worried that you could have fewer jobs, period. Sure.
It's really hard to go backwards. I mean, you think about now people are, what would you do without your phone, without your smartphone, right? And so I think one of the challenges that we face is, consumers drive all this, to
Right.
a great degree. And, I think we're always going to be moving forward. So we have to be thinking in the preparation of the future talent about what's coming next. At the same time, I do believe it's possible that things can get slowed down or redirected. Think about how people want to get their food nowadays. It's growing interest in getting your food locally, understanding exactly where your food is coming from, right? And so there are changes in the marketplace that are substantial, and they're driven by the consumer. So I just say, hey, look, consumer has much more power than what I believe the consumer has been exercising. And if the consumer wants to change what's in demand, the consumer can change what's in demand. They just have to do it in enough mass to be able to make enough of a change. But as an education institution, we have to be mindful of that's really hard to do. And it's more likely that the future jobs are, going to be driven by technology.
But you'll still need 100 Apple workers a day. I know my Apple store always has at least 120 workers in it. So technology changes, but wow, they're hiring a lot of people.
All right, well, on that note, our program is adjourning. We do encourage you all to stick around. We have a short reception until about 7 o'clock here. I want to thank you all for being with us this evening. Please check out our report that's available on the Chicago Council's website. And then join me in thanking Rob Perrell, Juan Salgado, Courtney Brown, and Doug Belkin, and the Lumina Foundation for this great event. Thank you very much.